Did you know that the kind of brushes you use help determine what kind of marks you make, contributing to a certain feel in your paintings? But how do the marks we make evoke feeling? Well, in this video, we're going to explore two very different but common brush shapes used to make paintings, a flat versus round, to see and test their impact on our art. So what's the difference besides the way they look? Do they impact the way you paint, your painting process, or even the look and feel of the painting in the end? Great questions. To help answer these questions, let me introduce you to our model, Mr. Tomato. I'll be doing 2 gouache demos to see the different techniques. But while our tomato is getting ready to model, let's check out a few things. Mark making is a term artists use when it comes to brush strokes or types of lines you draw, and this applies to all mediums. I love to refer to this as something that's very personable and almost like a signature to any artist. For example, if we take a look at Master J.C. Leyendecker, here we can see more angular shapes, and based on the brush strokes we see, it's possible he used the flat brush to really cut into those edges. He could have also used different brushes to create certain shadow shapes and highlights. And in this painting, we see evident flat brush strokes in the mark making as well. I believe it comes down to the amount of texture or softness you want to have, and there's no right or wrong, it's just the choices you want to make as an artist. And in these oil paintings, we see evident brush strokes as if the artist made the mark and just left it there. And perhaps a combination of brushes were used depending on the shadow shapes or highlights you'd want to make. So whether you want to explore a little bit more angular shapes or softer, thicker texture, the brushes you use will definitely help you achieve that. Now, of course, there are many components and different mediums, and I wanted to share different examples with you guys to simply start thinking about it. Now let's take a look at Anders Zorn, who gives a very soft approach to his paintings, yet retaining a really beautiful texture. Very masterful, I must say. If we take a look at some of the edges and the mark making, there's a lot of softness and roundness to it. Both different approaches still retaining that beautiful mark making. I highly recommend expanding and taking a look at a bunch of different paintings, observing this hidden language of the soul. And as we explore these 2 brush shapes, let's pay close attention to the edges and the expressive strokes that we can make. And let's also pay attention to the look and feel we want to evoke in our paintings as well. There are many different types of brushes, and they all have different characteristics, but for the flat brushes, they usually come in different sizes with a nice clean cut at the top. Some have longer bristles, and brushes usually either have a short or long handle. Let's quickly compare the different types of strokes. This varies on brush pressure, the amount of water you use, and the speed of the stroke as well. It's also great to experiment with turning your brush sideways and see the brush strokes you can make with smaller brushes, and what happens when you angle them in a bunch of different ways. Now let's take a look at a different shape, our round brushes. These also come in various sizes, some that come to a nice point, and some a bit more fluffier. Some hold a bit more paint and water, so it's really best to just play around with the different strokes you can make. I personally love some of the crosshatches you can make with round brushes, as if you're simply drawing with a brush. Changing the angle of the stroke and how close you hold it to the handle will change the mark you make, so give it a try, experiment, and get to know your brushes. Now that we've done a few tests with both the flat and round brush, let's complete 2 paintings side by side with each of them. And to quickly go over the supplies for you guys, I'm going to use a flat brush for the left side and the round brush for the right side. I'm going to paint on Tone Tan mixed media paper. It's nice and thick, which will allow gouache. I also like to prepare 2 water cups in glass jars. Some acrylic gouache paint. I'm going to be using a mix of the Acryla gouache and my regular gouache. And we need a place to mix our paint, so I'm going to be using this little tray and just a regular HB pencil to complete my sketch. Once all of the supplies are prepared, we can check back in with our model, Mr. Tomato, and see if he's ready to go in position. To practice studies, you can use a reference, but I highly recommend setting something up from life and adjusting your lamp or lighting to see how you can make the composition and lighting look more interesting. Also, placing your subject in different backgrounds can help make a more intriguing painting too. I'm all for painting from life, so be sure to play around with your lighting, position, and just explore what feels right for you. Remember, have fun with it and make it as exciting for yourself as possible, because in the end, it's what it comes down to. Initially, everything can look great, but what if you try out a bunch of different positions? After taking a moment to play around, I decided to take a little bit of little rubber putty and position my tomato on a slight angle. And then after taking a look at it again, I thought the stem was getting lost in foreshortening, so I tilted it just a bit. And with the final little detail and touch up, I think this composition is the one. So here's a quick before and after. Before and after. Much better. Now we can finally begin our sketch. When it comes to making the sketch, I focus on the angles that I see. Although it's a tomato and it is round, a spherical shape, if we take a closer look, there are still some angles we can see as well. And as artists, we can push the shapes, choose to exaggerate certain things, and here is the beauty, is that the possibilities are endless. I'm lightly indicating the areas and composition on the page, and although some of the areas will be covered with paint, I'm still figuring these things out ahead of time, getting to know my subject, and also just registers in the photographic memory. The two most important parts of this stage is placement and your choice of composition. Alrighty, and the first sketch is complete, but we will need two for both demos of different brushes, and as I complete the next sketch, a quick moment of gratitude to thank our sponsors of this video, Squarespace. I'm constantly asked on where I have the rest of my tutorials and exclusive videos, or simply more of my artwork or events that have happened or events that are coming up soon. Well, thanks to this all-in-one platform and this website that allows me to host my shop, display my portfolio as an artist, and also have a cool page where I can link all of my tutorials from Patreon. And yep, Squarespace allows me to do this all in one place. I just picked one of their award-winning templates that is super versatile, which I love, and began to build and build as time went on. But you truly don't need much to start. Give it a try by going to squarespace.com for your free trial, and when you're ready to launch, be sure to head over to squarespace.com/JessCarp for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now that both sketches are complete, let's jump into our first demo with our flat brushes. The two demos that are coming up will be one using only flat brushes and one using only round brushes. And I'm excited to walk you guys through my thought process with each brush shape, so let's begin with our flat brushes. Typically, I start off my paintings with toning the whole paper with a flat brush, a big brush to cover as much area as possible. But immediately after grabbing this bigger flat brush, I was able to change the way that I angle the brush and cover most of the reds rather quickly, so then I was able to grab a little bit of a smaller flat brush and continue to solidify and lay in some more paint. I started out with a mid-tone red, and then I began placing in my flat brush strokes, and this definitely changed my thought process. I really focused in on laying in the brush stroke and then just leaving it there. For demo and play purposes, I tried to play around with different brush shapes, and I noticed myself slow down a bit when I would grab a little bit of a smaller brush, which I think is a good thing. After laying in majority of the tomato loosely, I really wanted to retain the brush strokes, but then I mixed in my shadow shape, and to keep it unified, I mixed a little bit of red into this color as well. If you've been watching the channel, you know I am not used to using only flat brushes. I tend to lean towards round brushes, so this was definitely a really interesting experiment for me. And I noticed how it forced me to think in shapes and values and the way that I place each color, and also not overworking the brush stroke. I really liked that it forced me to mix my paint in a very nice consistency for this type of brush. And then I explored angling in a different way to get nice clean cuts as well. But yeah, it definitely felt like using a different brain muscle. Once I had the mid-tone of the greens, I started to mix in this little olive green with a bit more yellow, and certain areas of the tomato to have a bit more blues mixed in. Painting in the stem and the greens definitely became my favorite part. After building from midtones into a little bit of highlights, the final touches, I added some really dark shapes and a pink reflected light on the right bottom of the tomato. Highlights always finish off the painting to be the most satisfying part, I think. But instead of drawing rounded shapes, I just tilted the brush to make certain marks, and then also experimented with little light glazes for some of the shadows and highlights as well. Overall, in conclusion, the flat brush really forced me to just be very confident with the brush stroke, make concrete decisions, because once the brush stroke was placed, there was no more overworking or overblending. The values had to speak for themselves. Here's our first little tomato study using only flat brushes. I had a lot of fun with this one, but now let's jump into our round brushes and see how it can change our thought process and painting process. One element that was super similar in both processes was using a bigger brush and starting off with something larger and making my way and working into something smaller as I needed to get into further detail. It's safe to say that round brushes are my safe haven and something I feel super comfortable using. And after making the switch into this demo, I did feel a bit more confident with the way I was laying in some of the strokes. Perhaps it's the art of repetition and doing a similar study just in a different type of brush, but putting in the hours is one of the best things that you can do. I also followed a similar process in laying in the values of the paint. However, I did find my brush strokes and process of laying in and the direction of the brush strokes to be a little bit different with the round brush. I love painting with crosshatches and angling the crosshatches to make the volume and the object turn. And I also personally really enjoy working in layers and seeing how all the different colors can morph into one another with little crosshatches too. This time around for the greenery, I wanted to add a bit more of this teal color for the blues and make it a bit more minty. And I also like to finish off with a thicker layer and some juicier color for those final brush strokes. As I'm painting, I'm always taking a step back and looking at the painting as a whole. My eyes are glancing back up and down from my reference to my painting. And with each study, I try to make sure that I have my highlights, midtones, and shadows, and also some reflected light. The rest I can play around with different brush strokes, color options, and with this study, I actually decided to blend in a bit more red into the drop shadow. And this way it's all connected. And there we are. Our 2 painting studies are complete, but here's a quick recap of both developing side by side. So on the left, we've got our flat brush study, and on the right, our round brush study. Let me know which shape of brush you love most, a round or a flat. I'm definitely super excited to test out some of these techniques with other subjects like landscapes and florals, and of course my favorites, some portraiture. Let me know what you guys think of both of these down in the comments below. If you're not yet subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Here's what our palette looks like, and as always, all of the materials are going to be linked down below. Upon reflection, I have to say I love both for their own ways, and I think that doing both of these and experimenting with both brushes allowed me to figure things out with fun and interesting ways to convey our amazing subject. And it's also super cool to see him right beside the paintings. I hope you found this one helpful, and I really hope you stay creative. Don't forget to stay curious. If you want to keep on watching, check out the video on the screen, and I'll see you guys in the next one.